Okay, as Hashem, today in Masechah Shabbos, we're going to learn Gimel Amud Aleph, 3a. We'll start the bottom of Beis Amud Beis at the two dots. Amar le Rav Masna la'Abaye. We're going to have two sections today. The first, the Gemara will analyze the 2 which is 4 statement of our Mishnah, which implies there's 8 cases in the Mishnah. And the Gemara is going to challenge this and say there should be 12, there should be 16. And then we'll discuss exactly why it's 8. And we'll discuss why, if each one's doing half the melacha, there's a patur. And the second section we'll discuss is the distinction between a person's body moving and his hand moving. Very interesting shaila we'll get to at the end of the day today. But before we begin, let's just remember in our Mishnah the layout that we had. We had 2 sections of the Mishnah. We had the Reisha, which discussed the Isurei Dairaisa of carrying. And then we had the Seifa, which was the Isurim Drabanan. Now, we said in the Reisha of the Mishnah, there's Shtayim Shehein Arba Bifnim and Shtayim Shehein Arba Mibachutz. Which another way of saying that is, there's 2, the way we explained, Isurei Dairaisa. There's another 2 Isurim Drabanan, for each, the Balabayas and the Ani, thank you. And therefore, if each one has 4 Isurim, there should be a total of 8 Isurim in the Mishnah. The problem with that is, as the Gemara of Masa is going to lay out to us, is that in the Seifa of the Mishnah, the cases that are Pater Avalasr, that are Asim Rabbanan, because one person didn't do both the Akira and the Anacha, as we said in the Mishnah, really, both of them are doing something that's Asr. Let's just illustrate. In a scenario where the Balabayas picks something up, the Ani stretches his hand into the Rosh Hashanah. Balabayas puts it in the Ani's hand. Ani takes it out and puts it down. Balabayas did the Akira and Rosh Hashanah. Ani did the Hanacha and Rosh Hashanah. And we said they're both doing something that's Asr Me'Derabanan.
Technically, they can be both pater.
They are both pater. That is the halacha. But the kasha the Gemara Masa is going to say is, our Mishnah says Shtayim Shein Arba, which means each of them has 4 Isurim, which is a total of 8 Isurim in the Mishnah. The problem is it should really be Shtayim Sheheim Shisha, 2 which are 6, which is a total of 12 Isurim, because in the Seifa of the Mishnah we had 4 cases, and each of them is doing a Davar Ha'asur in the Seifa, half of either the Akira or the Hanacha, which means you have 4 Isurim Dairaisa in the Reisha, and then you have 4 cases of Isur Drabanan in the Seifa, which is a total of 8 more Isurim, as each party is doing an Isur Drabanan, which means it should really be 12 Isurim in the Mishnah. So it should really say, Shtayim Shehem Shisha Mibifnim, Shtayim Shehem Shisha Mibachutz. So why does it say Arba, which implies there's 8 Isurim? Really, it should be 12 Isurim in the Mishnah. This is the kasha of Rav Masna. So let's see that inside. Amar le Rav Masna la'Abaye. So three lines from the bottom of Beis and Beis. Rav Masna says to Abaye, Hatamni Havin, is this really 8 cases of Isser in the Mishnah? Tartis Rehavin, really it should be 12, as we explained, because the Seifa shouldn't be 4 more Isurim, it should actually be 8 more Isurim, because again, both the person doing the Akira and the other fellow doing the Anach are doing an Isser, and there's 4 more cases. That's 8 more Isurim. Abaye turns back to Rav Masna and he says, but the way that you're understanding, Shitzari Havyan, maybe the Mishnah should really have said 16. Now why should the Mishnah say 16? Because in the Reisha of the Mishnah, where one person did the Akira and the Hanacha, and the other person was a passive party, we also said Pater over there. So maybe we should also include the passive party of the Reisha in the number of cases, says Abaye to Rav Masna, and then it comes out that there's 8 cases in the Reisha and 8 cases in the Seifa for a total of 16. So Amar le Rav Masna says back, that's not a kasha. Hale kasha. That's not difficult on what I'm asking. Because Bishlama, turning to Gimel Amud Aleph, Baba de Reisha, the first grouping of cases in the Mishnah, the Reisha, Pater Umuter, where one person does both the Akira and the Hanacha, he's chayav midairaisa. What he's doing is an Isur Dairaisa. The passive party who is just standing there, let's just illustrate again. Ani picks it up in Rosh Hashanah, puts his hand into Rosh Hashanah, and puts it in the hands of the Balabayas. Balabayas is passive. He is not doing anything Asr at all. Actually, as Rashi said, it's mutter lechatchila what he's doing. So, pater umutter. Therefore, it's completely mutter. So, lokatani, that's not included in the number. Elababa de Seifa. But in the end of the Mishnah, the 4 more cases we have where each one's doing a part that's usser, the pater aval usser, those are pater. It's true, they're not chayav midaraisa, but it is usser midrabanan. So kasha, says Rav Masna, comes out that there's 8 more isurim in the Seifa. Why isn't that included in the number? We addressed this when we learned the Mishnah, but the Gemara now is speaking this out. Now the Gemara turns back to Rav Masna, and the Gemara says to Rav Masna, wait a second. What you're saying, pshat in the Mishnah is, in the Reisha of the Mishnah, where one fellow does both Akira and Hanacha, and there's a passive party, it's Pater umuter, meaning the passive party is, the way Rashi said it before, is Muter lechatchila. He's not doing anything wrong at all. Not Dairaisa, not Drabanan. The problem is, we have a Memra of Shmuel who says, he says a very interesting statement, which is, in all of Shabbos, Maseches Shabbos, Hilchos Shabbos, there's 3 scenarios of Pater umuter. And these are not those scenarios. So the kasha is going to be, why are these not included if taka it's pater umuter? Now what are these 3 scenarios? They're very interesting cases. Asks the Gemara, Mika b'kulei Shabbos pater umuter? Are there other cases in Hilchos Shabbos, in Mesechus Shabbos, pater umuter means muter lechatchila? The problem is, v'ha'amar Shmuel, but Shmuel says, kol peturei de Shabbos, wherever we discuss exemptions in Hilchos Shabbos, your pater, it means pater, aval aser. Usually pater in Hilchos Shabbos, in Mesechus Shabbos means you're pater midaraisa, but it's aser midarabanan. Bar mehanitlas, besides the following 3 cases, the pater umuter, which are pater and muter. Now what are those 3 cases? They are, let's read them and then I'll explain as we go. I'll explain at the end. Tzeras tzvi, trapping a deer. Tzeras nachash, trapping a snake. Umapis morsa, and lancing a boil. Now, we know in Hilchos Shabbos, what I just said, if it was taken at face value, that'd actually be Asr Midairaisa. So the Gemara on Kuf Zayin goes through exactly what is the scenario of each of these that's Pater Umuter. Means not only you're not Chayav Midairaisa, but it's Muter Midrabanan as well. I'll just tell you briefly what those are. So, but Shmuel, these are the cases of Pater Umuter. Tzidas Tzvi, trapping a deer, is a specific case. So there's a deer inside of a room, and there's an opening of the door. Now, to go and stand at that opening is an isser of entrapment. That would be usser on Shabbos. But if somebody is already standing in the doorway, and on Shabbos, and you went and stood behind him. Behind him. So the first fellow did the isser of tzad, of trapping. The second fellow is just standing there. Even if the first fellow would walk away, the second fellow is still not, it's pater or mutter. Now why? Because he didn't do the melacha of entrapment. He didn't do the melacha of tzad. He didn't trap that deer in the room. That's pater or mutter, Zak Shmuel. Okay? Case number 2, tziras nachash. What is trapping a snake? Now again, to outright trap an animal is usser. So again, this has to be, as the Gemara there explains, it's a scenario where really, it's not melacha tzricha legufa, that you're doing it for the melacha, because the av melacha, the isser da'iraisa of entrapment would be where you're trapping the animal for the usage of that animal. You want that animal. Here, you have a snake that's going to potentially bite somebody. Now, it's not where it's biting somebody that's going to chas v'shalom cause pikuach nefesh, because then you're mechal Shabbos legamri, there's no question. We're talking about where it would bite and cause harm, but it's not going to cause pikuach nefesh. Nonetheless, you're not trapping it because you want the animal. You're trapping it to get rid of it from this room. You want to get rid of it. So it's not the av melacha of entrapment. It still would be asr midrabanan, other than the fact that it's causing tsar. Since it's causing tsar, it even removes the asr drabanan of entrapment, and that's also going to be mutter. So it uses the sheet of Rabbi Shimon, while melacha she'ena tzricha legufa is mutter and midaraisa, and it also, based on the fact that it's tsar, it's causing people suffering, you're also allowed, that's pater or mutter. And the third case, mapis morsa, so this is a fascinating case. Mapis morsa.
Back to the first case where God's standing in. Are you allowed to untrap an animal on Shabbos?
What does that mean?
You see, there's a posture case. The deer is trapped in a trap. Can you untrap it on Shabbos?
I don't see what the melacha there would be.
I don't know, I'm just asking.
I'm not sure why that would be.
I'm asking in the second case, when the guy moves away, can he move away to untrap that animal?
That's interesting. I don't see what the melacha should be in that regard. I don't see. It's the opposite, right? Mapis morsa, lancing a boil. So you have a boil, and now look, if your kavana, you have a boil and it's bothering you, okay, because there's pus in there and it's bothering you. Now, technically, to make a hole in that boil, should be an isser of boina. This is a fascinating melacha. Building. Why is it building? If your intent is to make a hole that should remain open so that the boil dries up, so that's like building something on Shabbos, and that would be asur midaraisa. But since, in this case that we're specifically talking about mapis morsa, you just want the pus to go out to relieve the pressure that's bothering you. If it closes up the next minute, you don't care. That's not your point. You don't need. Open, you don't care either. You don't need. Right. You don't need that hole to stay open. You just want to relieve the pressure that the pus comes out now. So therefore, again, it's melacha she'ena tzricha legufa, and since it's tsar for you, that's pater umuter. But Zokt Shmuel, these are the three cases in Hilchas Shabbos of pater umuter. It says Gemara Torah Masna, but the way you're understanding the Reisha of the Mishnah is that there's more cases, which are cases where one person does the akira and the anach, and the passive party is pater umuter. So the Gemara answers not a kasha, because ki yitzter echleila Shmuel, a different category. Shmuel's chiddush was peturei de ka'avid maisa, where there's something that's completely permissible, where you're doing a proactive action. That's the chiddush of Shmuel. Usually if you're doing some sort of an action, at least it's asur midarabanan. His chiddush is, despite the action, it's still pater umuter. But petur de lo ka'avid maisa ikatuva. But there's many examples where you're passive and not doing an action, that's pater umuter, hence our Mishnah isn't difficult in face of Shmuel. But the Gemara says, Mikol Makom Tartis Rehavyan, nonetheless, you're still back to the Kasha of Rav Masna. Based on the fact that the Seifa has 4 cases, and each of them is doing an Isser in those cases, one's doing Akira, the other's doing the Anacha, there should be 80 Surim in the Mishnah. So why does it say 12 Isurim in the Mishnah? So why does our Mishnah say 2, which is 4? It should really say 2, which is 6. So the Gemara answers, not a Kasha, I actually spoke this out, Rashi on the Mishnah addressed this. Peturi de asi behuli de chiyuv chatas kachashiv. The number 2, which is 4, which is mashma, there's 80 isurim in the Mishnah, is only incorporating the isurim that could potentially lead now to the isur d'oraisa and requiring a chatas. But the loy asi behuli de chiyuv chatas, those actions that cannot possibly lead now to a chayav chatas, like a chashiv, are not included. So let's speak that out. In the Seifa of the Mishnah, we had 4 cases. It's only the fellow who's doing the akira who could potentially result now in an isur d'oraisa. The fellow who's doing the hanacha after receiving it from the oiker, from the person who did the akira, you can't do the akira because it's already been done. He is doing the hanacha now. So included in the number is only those that are starting off the mice that could potentially lead to an isur d'oraisa. The fellow who did the hanacha, it is asur, which is also a gezerah because maybe in the future you'll do an akira and hanacha. But in regards to this maisa, they're not included in that number. That's why it says 2 which are 4 and not 2 which are 6. Asks the Gemara the question that we've been wondering, which is, what's the lemaisa, the pshat in this? We're saying that if one person does an akira and the hanacha, you're chayav midaraisa. But if one person does the akira and the other does the hanacha, you're not chayav midaraisa. But at the end of the day, there's been an akira and hanacha that are done. So why is it that when one does the akira and one does the hanacha, despite the fact that the entire process has been accomplished, you're not chayav midaraisa? What's lemaisa the difference? Says the Gemara, Shneim Peturin, they're both exempt in the Seifa. But the problem is, the melacha has been constructed, it's been accomplished between the both of them. So why not chayav midaraisa? So Tanya Rebbe answered, he said in the Brisa as follows. Pasuk tells us in Parshas Vayikra, when it talks about the chayav of a carbon chatas, it says, Me'ama aretz, from the people of the land, means people, ba'asai sa. When are you chayav a chatas? When you do it. Now, the way we're going to understand ba'asaisa is asa, oisa. He has to do the whole thing by himself. Ha'oisa is kula, you're only chayav the chatas, you're only over d'oraisa if you do the entire action. V'loya oisa is miktsasa, but not if you do part of it. And therefore, yachid va'asa oisa, if one person does the entire isur, the akira, the hanacha, for example, chayav, he's chayav d'oraisa. But shnayim va'asa oisa, if 2 people engage in doing that, and they're exempt because each one did only half. It's marnami, and it was also stated Rabbi Chia bar Gamda, that Rabbi Chia bar Gamda backed this up. He said, Nizra kami pi chabura. From the mouth of the chabura, this psak was literally means thrown out, but meaning it was dictated. Va'amru, and they said, Ba'asaisa, the verse Ba'asaisa teaches us, Yachid sha'asa chayav. If one person does the entire melacha, you're chayav. But if 2 people did it together in tandem, you're going to be patur because you didn't do the entirety of the action. Let's move on now to the second section. And this is a fascinating shaila. Let's remember in the Seifa of the Mishnah, one of the cases of Isser D'Rabbanan was where the ani stretches his hand into the Rishus HaYachid, okay? Into the Rishus HaYachid. The Balabayas picks up a piece of bread and he puts it in the hand of the ani, and then the ani removes his hand and puts it down in Rishus HaRabim. So the Balabayas did the Akira. He put the item in.
How do you define Akira? That's weird. I mean, Akira can't you define the ani's really doing the Akira? The
Balabayas picked up
so
the
has
bread.
to actually physically picked up.
So probably what you're touching on is a little bit gets into what we're about to discuss. The Balabayas did the Akira. He put it in the hands of the ani, as opposed to the ani taking it from his hand. I want to be clear about that. The ani takes it from his hand. He's doing the Akira. The Balabayas put in the ani's hand. The ani retrieved his hand to the public domain, put it down. He did the hanacha. They're both pater avalasser. Now the Gemara asks a fascinating shaila. Listen to what we just paskin in terms of that case. Explain to me what the difference is between that versus I'm standing inside with Reb Klonimus and it's Shabbos. Reb Klonimus takes a slice of pizza. He puts it in my pocket. He put a slice of pizza in my pocket, and then I walk outside.
You're in the Rishus HaYachid. Okay.
We're both in Rishus HaYachid together. He put a slice of pizza in my pocket, and then I walk outside. Now, who did the Akira, l'chayra?
Hand versus pocket.
Who did the Akira?
Yeah,
you.
Right.
Who did the hanacha? I go outside, I put it down. So, l'chayra, you'd say that you did the Akira, I walked outside, did the hanacha, we should both be pater. But that's not the halacha. I'm chayav. But what's the difference? Why is it that when my hand stretches in, you put it in my hand and I take it out, you did the Akira, I did the hanacha, we're both pater, midaraisa. Whereas, when you put it in my pocket, in Rishus HaYachid, and I walk outside on Shabbos, I'm chayav because I did Akira and Hanacha. What's the difference? So Rav's going to ask Rebbe this shaila, and that is based on the psak that I told you before, where the ani stretches his hand in. Let's read that inside. Boy minei Rav me Rebbe. Rav asked Rebbe the following question. Shaila, hit'ino chavera ochlinu mashkin. I was standing in the Rishus HaYachid, Reb Klonimus put on me, literally means he loaded on me. He put on me ochlenu mashkin, food and drink. It's just an example, something to carry. And then v'hotzion lachutz, I walked outside. I put it down. Mahu, what's the halacha in this case? Now Rebbe understood Rav's shaila was coming from the case of our Mishnah that implies they're both doing a separate action and it should be pater. So do we say, it's a very interesting shaila, akiras gufo ki akiras chefetz mimkomo dami? Do we say lifting my body from the Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus HaRabim, that's like moving an object from private to public domain, and I've done the Akira. Umechayev, so I should be chayev. Or Dilmar, perhaps low. Or do we say no? Moving the body is not like moving an object and lifting an object off the ground. He moved the object, I just did the hanocha outside, and I should be pater. So Rebbe responded, Amar le, Rebbe said back to Rav, chayev, the person who walked outside is chayav. Ve'eno dom liyado. You cannot compare the item that's on his body to the item put in his hand. What's the difference? My time, what's the reason? That says Rebbe. Because it's a very interesting svara. Gufo nayech. The body is resting on the ground. So therefore, since the body is stationary on the ground, it's stationary in a Rishus HaYachid. When I start walking outside, that constitutes an Akira that I've now moved that item when I walk outside.
In your hand?
Yado lo nayech. But my hand is not resting on the ground in Rishus HaYachid. I'm outside, my hand's stretched inside. Since my hand's not resting on the ground, you can't say that I did an Akira Rishus HaYachid. I took my hand back out. So therefore says Rebbe, when you put it on me and I'm stationary, that's a very important point, and then I pick up from the stationary position and I walk, now I've been oker my body, now I created an Akira by moving, and therefore I did the Akira, I did the Anoch outside, I'm chayiv. That was Rebbe's chiddush. So there's a distinction. Turn to Gimel and Beis. Now, Rabbi Chia was the middle generation. Rabbi Chia was the Rebbe of Rav. He was actually the uncle of Rav as well. And he was the Talmud of Rebbe. And Rabbi Chia was watching this conversation between Rav and Rebbe. Granted, actually, the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us, I just learned it, that Rebbe gave Rav smicha, and Rabbi Chia was the one who asked Rebbe to give Rav smicha. So Rebbe, Rabbi Chia, Rav, that's the generations here. So Rabbi Chia was observing, and he gave Rav a little bit of musar. Rabbi Chia said to Rav, Bar Pachti is an expression of praise. Ben Gedolim, says Rashi. You're the son of great ones, means you're great, Rav. Rav was a tremendous chacham. So he said, the son of great ones, Rabbi Chia said to his Talmud Rav, Lo yaminu lecha, have I not told you, ki koi Rebbe b'ha mesechta, that if the Rebbe is learning one mesechta, one topic, lo tishayli mesechta achriti, you shouldn't ask him questions on a different mesechta. Why? Because maybe he doesn't know the answer necessarily. Because if not for the fact that Rabbi Yehuda Anasi was such a great person and he's holding in all of Torah, you might have embarrassed him. Why? Because maybe he would have answered you something that's not a good answer. So therefore, didn't I tell you that I guess Rabbi Chia had observed that Rebbe was learning Hilchas Nida, and Rav comes over and asks him the Shaila in Hilchas Shabbos. I already told you not to do this. Hashtamias, Rabbi Chia said, practically now, Shapir Mishani Lecha. Rebbe still told you the right answer. Why? The Tanya, because the Brisa backs him up. The Brisa says, Hayata'un Eichlin Umashkin. It's interesting. Who compiled Brisais? It's Rabbi Chia, right? I think it might, was it Rabbi Chia?
Is it the one that's Noki?
I have to check into that, but that would be interesting if he was the one who did, because he's using his Brisa to back up Rebbe. I have to check that out.
Somebody's Noki.
Kavinaki was Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, I think. Kavinaki, I think. Titania, the Brisa teaches, the Brisa is a different case, but it's the same practical principle. If you have a person, he's standing in the private domain on Friday, and it's about to be Shabbos, and he puts pizza in his pocket. Now it turns to Shabbos, and he was stationary. And he picked up from his stationary position on Shabbos, he brought them outside as it already had become Shabbos. So chayav. He is chayav, says the Brisa. Now why is he chayav? Because his body moving is not the same as his hand moving. Meaning to say like this, even though he did picking up and putting in his pocket before Shabbos started, since it was in his pocket before Shabbos and Shabbos already occurred, now that he's stationary in private domain, picking up from that is a new akira. Going outside and putting it down is an akira and a hanoch outside, which would make him chayiv. Why? It's not the same as your hand, says the Brisa. Where the hand stretched inside, you put it inside, pulling the hand back is not considered an akira that you're doing personally. The balabais did akira, you did the hanoch, and therefore you're not chayiv. Now one final point before we finish for the day, Taisvis points out, and this makes sense also, this would only be true where he was stationary inside. But let's say the situation was that the second before Shabbos started, he was in Rosh Hashanah and he started walking outside. Now when Shabbos hits, he's already in the motion of going outside. You can't call that Akiras Gufo, moving his body is like Akiras Chefetz, because he's already in the motion of moving. So it would have to be, in order to be Chayiv, there was something in his pocket, he was holding something. He was stationary, Shabbos started, and then he moved his body outside. That would be like an akira, and you'll be chayiv if you do the hanocha outside as well. Fascinating chiddush. All right, we'll stop here at the 2 dots towards the top of Gimel Beis, and we'll pick up tomorrow with Gimel Amud Beis Be'ezus Hashem. Have a great day.